Hello and welcome to our next Zoom chat. This is Leonie Gallagher. Hi, Leonie.
Hi, Lisa. How are you?
Good, thank you. Leonie is a psychotherapist and counsellor at her practice, A Space to Heal. She's also a friend of mine, a good friend. We met on our first day training at the Tivoli Institute in 2011.
Yes,
2011. When we were 19, obviously. And haven't aged a day since. Anyhow, I asked you, Leonie, if you would do one of these chats with me, and I was delighted when you said you would. We started off thinking that we might do something around grief, which is a big topic. And you shared then that you would like to talk about something that is very, very important to you and something that you feel very passionate about, which is grief in relation to suicide.
Yes.
Now, this is a very important but tricky, complicated subject. So I think for both of us, we just want to say, for anybody who's watching this who might feel that this subject is going to trigger them in a way that's bigger than they can tolerate, just to be very careful of themselves. And while it's so important that we talk about it, for anybody who is recently bereaved by suicide, perhaps take some time before looking at this and make sure you have some support around you. But we do need to talk about it. And I was very, 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 very pleased when you said that you would like to talk about your experience. And thank you for that. And I am going to hand over to you. I will ask you any questions as they crop up, and you can feel free to answer them or not as you see fit. But tell us what you'd like to talk about, Leonie.
I'd like to talk about my own personal experience without the psychotherapy hat on.
Okay.
Because I think that grief for everybody is very unique. There's all the textbook 5 stages, 7 stages, or whatever. But for me, I'd like to just share what I went through.
Okay.
And what happened was on the 10th of December 2014, I lost my husband to suicide. Which was naturally very shocking, very difficult. But I knew that my husband had suffered from depression for most of his life. And he was just too gentle a soul for this world. So unlike many other people who have been bereaved by suicide, there's the what if I said this, what if I did that, I didn't know, if I had known. I accepted it immediately, which is probably a bit unusual.
Okay.
But at the same time, I had to go through the process of grief.
Yes.
And initially, it's just that numbing shock.
I was going to say, so the shock, although you knew that there was a history of depression with your husband, the shock, can you say something about the shock?
It's a bit surreal.
Mm-hmm.
I think given that the time of year it was coming up to Christmas, which heightens emotions for everybody in any circumstance, you know. But I mean, I remember walking up along Grafton Street on Christmas Eve, which we did together most Christmas Eves, and just feeling like everything else was in slow motion. And it was almost like I was invisible. And I was just walking, but not aware of walking. It was quite surreal.
Okay.
And then there's sort of trying to get through the Christmas period. And again, it feels just like putting one foot in front of another. That numbness lasted for quite some time, aside from the fact, I suppose, that with suicide, there's a lot of, there's an inquest, there's statements to the guards, there's all of those things as well, which are very, very difficult and feel quite intrusive.
Of course.
But when I look back, I must say that the local guards were really amazing throughout the whole process up to the inquest. They were just so supportive. But at the same time, yes, you get supports, but grief is something that you have to live it. There's
no way around it.
There's no way around it. And I was in a situation where I was in the house with my son, and both of us were trying to be brave for each other. So didn't cry in front of each other. I was trying to be the brave one, focusing on everything else and staying very busy. And it wasn't probably until the July I had a weekend in the house on my own. My son was visiting family, and I howled, Lisa, and I sat I closed all the curtains of the lounge and I sat and I howled. And it wasn't that I didn't accept it. I think I was howling for him. There's a need to try and keep the memory alive. There's a need for consistency. I couldn't remember his voice, and that really upset me. And I would take out, the video of our wedding, and strangely enough, his voice, there was no sound. I'd watched this with him loads of times, but when I played it on my own, there was no sound. It was the strangest thing. And you miss the touch, you miss the feel of them, how they sound, how they smell. All the other senses are heightened, and those senses come about at different times, and they're more important at different times. And I did go through the stage of, walking around locally and thinking I saw him, which does happen a lot, and thinking, oh, there he is, it's just all a dream, and no, it's not. This is the reality.
When you say that about feeling surreal as kind of the world goes on around you, did you keep going in a practical sense, or did you feel that you just couldn't do anything?
No, I kept going in a practical sense, but it was sort of like on autopilot.
Okay.
In fact, Lisa, the only place I felt very grounded and real was in the therapy room with clients. And I feel, without appearing to be superhuman or brilliant or anything like that, I feel I did some of my best work there. And I think it's because all your defenses are down. There's a connection that was very real then. And I felt very at home in the therapy room. It was a safe place for me, as well as the safe place we make for our clients.
And interestingly, a lot of therapists don't like to reveal too much of themselves or anything of themselves about their life to clients. You feel slightly differently about that in relation to this.
I do, particularly with bereavement. Because I think I feel it's very important to be as honest as you can. And I feel any clients that come to me who are grieving, they are aware then that I'm not just coming from a textbook perspective, that I've actually experienced it, even though their experience might be very different to my own. Everything is unique. But there's a sense of, oh, well, there's a life experience of this there. So I feel it is important to share that aspect of my experience with the clients.
Amazing. And we know the trauma can often be, and always be, held in the body. You had a particular experience around your dance. Tell us about that.
Because in a previous life I was a ballet teacher and dancer, and then I went into psychotherapy. And again, this would have probably been after the howling weekend in July, and I thought, I had cried buckets and thought, right, you have to do something now. And I was just sitting in the kitchen Googling one day, and up came this, I was Googling dance therapy because it was something obviously I was very interested in, kind of combining the two. And
dance therapy, for anybody who doesn't know, is where dance is used in a therapeutic way.
That's right.
And it can be particularly helpful for people who struggle to speak their words about what they're feeling. And so the therapy happens in the dance. So this was something that you were interested in.
Very interested in. And butterflies had been a huge part of the funeral, and I have a huge, the whole idea of my husband being able to fly, not trapped by the darkness of what he had to endure every day. And I'm sitting here anyway, I'm Googling, and up comes this Jardin Mariposa in the Canary Islands, and a butterfly flew across the screen, and I went, I'm very spiritual. I'm a very spiritual person. Some people aren't, but I think it really, really helped me. I always felt a sense of him. I felt a connection with him. Anyway, this butterfly goes across and I went, I have to have a look at this. And by the end of that week, I was booked to go off for a week's intensive training to Jardin Park Mariposa with their founder, Petra Klein. I had never done anything like this before, Lisa. As you well know, I'm quite organized. I like to know where I'm at. But for me to actually take off and fly by the seat of my pants off to somewhere. Anyway, off I went in the September and arrived in this beautiful place just in the north part of Tenerife, right by the coast. Arrived still feeling a little bit, what am I really doing here? And met Petra, and it was, I kind of giggled to myself, and she's German, very German. She said, we will meet in the morning at 8 o'clock. I thought, okay, no lying for me then. So, yes. So anyway, there we go. I went up to her studio and we sat and talked for a little while. And then she said, okay, let's put some music on and let's, dance. And I was completely frozen. I had been dancing since the time I was 3 and I just could not move. And I was so shocked at how stuck I was. And
was it frightening?
It was frightening because I thought this is part of my identification. That's another part we might talk about in a moment, about trying to figure out what your identity is now when you're a widow and you've been in a couple. But she tried to get me to move a little bit, and it was really stifled movement, wooden movement. And she said, okay, you must go out into the garden. And she's made this magnificent garden of life, and there's headphones, and you go into the garden and it takes about 2.5 hours to walk around. And it's this sound is accompanied by, there's music and she's talking, and you go through there's different areas of the garden that are stages of life. And I got into that garden and I bawled. I really released. And it was funny. I remember going to breakfast the next morning, and there was a gorgeous group of German group who were finishing off shamanic training. Lovely. And they kind of saw me with the frog eyes and they went, have you been in the garden? So they knew. Yeah. But the following day, obviously I went up to start training with her again, and the movement was a little bit easier. And it was quite amazing. By the end of the week, I felt such freedom in my movement because I had been able to release. Yeah. And I think part of that was being away from the environment that I was trying to sort of, I suppose, at a level control what you can't control, and out of the country and right on the edge of the cliff with the sea rolling in and Mount Taylor behind. I mean, magnificent place. But I was able to release. Yeah. And it really showed me how stuck I'd actually been. Yeah. So that was probably the first stage of me being able to feel the grief, feel the loss. Yeah,
there's a cathartic part to it, isn't there? I mean, even the notion of the butterfly, but it's like that physical release from your body brings the freedom back in to move, in your case, to dance, the way that you always had.
Absolutely. And dancing had always been my go-to.
Yeah.
And to experience going to my dance place, my happy place, and not being able to move really showed how frozen I was in it, really. Yeah. But moving on from there, I began to think about myself and my own identity. Yeah. And that's a huge part of grieving, because you've been either a mother or a sister or a couple or a husband or a wife, and suddenly that person isn't there anymore. And I think when it's a husband or a wife, you have this title of widow or widower, and I found the title of widow very difficult to accept.
Yeah. I remember you talking about that at the time and thinking, you know, like you said to me, like I'm a bit young for this title of widow, but it's the loss of role, isn't it? It's like your
Absolutely.
role as a wife, or you know, whatever your role is, but it's huge, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. And, you know, even obviously there were a lot of forms to fill in, you know, all the practical side of it. And it was widow, and I'm thinking, I really don't like writing this.
Yeah.
You know? But your whole social scene changes as well, Lisa, which is something that a lot of people, we don't really talk about it much. Yeah. And what I found quite difficult to figure out was that as a widow, you don't get asked places. You don't get asked to dinner parties anymore. I mean, we were very social people. Mm. Dinner parties every other week, you know, loads of friends. And a lot of people disappeared.
Why do you think that is?
I feel in hindsight, a lot of people don't know what to say, particularly when it's a death by suicide. They don't know what to say, so they stay away. And actually, that's so difficult. Yeah. Because it doesn't matter. It's not about saying the right words. It's about just being there. It's about calling up and saying, look, let's go for a walk. We don't have to talk, but let's just go. Let's just, somebody actually being there is what you need. And
I think about this a lot, because in Ireland we do the whole funeral situation so well and so extravagantly and everything. I think a lot of the mourning is for the people outside of the family who want to pay their respects, and that's great. But if we think about who we're actually trying to help in that, the person who has suffered the bereavement, we need to put ourselves aside a little bit and think about what they might need. So I often find myself, and I get very emotional at funerals, even if I don't know the person particularly well, but I have decided that for me, what I want to do, if I don't know what to do, is I want to say, I don't know what to say to you, but I do want you to know that I'm thinking of you, or that I'm available to talk to you, or that can I do anything for you, but I don't know what to say to you.
Yeah. And that is the perfect response. Yeah. It's the perfect response. And, you know, as well, there are some times when you just want to hide away. You want to be under the duvet and say, I just need to be on my own. But the loneliness, you know, as time moves on, as you said, there's the funeral and all the people are around, and then the month's mind and there's people around. And it's the months further down the line where suddenly you're on your own. And that loneliness is excruciating. Yeah. It really is.
And I suppose there's a way of saying, you know, sending a text or whatever and saying, perhaps you want to be on your own. If you don't, you can give me a call, but I'm going to leave you to do what you need to do.
Absolutely.
And I suppose trust the person who's going through it, that they know what they need as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Because it's allowing that space, really.
Yeah.
To say, I leave that with you. If you want to take it up, take it up. If you need to be on your own, that's fine. But for me, an awful lot of people just disappeared. And I just couldn't figure that out. Yeah. And your whole social scene, which is a huge part of your life, just disappears.
Yeah.
And all the, you know, you're remembering all the crack and you're remembering all the good times, and suddenly you're just here on your own. It's, how do I figure my way through this? How do I create a social life again? Yeah. With this new place, in this new role of widow. Yeah. So I kind of thought, right, you know, I got to a stage and I thought, well, I've got to try and build this up again. And I started to invite people over to my house. So my house was like a restaurant. I was having loads of people around, you know, and it filled that space. Yeah. But somewhere through all of that, I had to find a way back to me. I had to find a way to find, okay, who am I? Yeah. Now. Rediscover who I am. Yeah, now who I am. And through some friends, and I took up yoga, which was just amazing. Did it again, completely randomly. Went and did a rainbow yoga course for children for a long weekend in October, simply because I couldn't bear being on my own for a long weekend. And it was just amazing, absolutely amazing. And I was very reluctant and a bit kind of, ooh, you know, how am I going to be in this? And it just connected me with my younger self. And yeah, and I just loved it. And it for that whole weekend, I just felt lighter again.
Yeah.
You know, and that carried through then into other areas of my life. And I took up, again, my mum and my family have been an amazing support, my own family. But my mum who was also a dancer and teacher, and she's retired now, but she was doing a ballroom class just locally, and she said, come on, you know, just get out of the house. Yeah. And I thought, oh, really? And I loved it. Yeah. And it was a whole new area of dance that I went into as well, you know. So, and that opened up a whole social scene for me as well. So
there's a leap, you have to take a leap of faith, I suppose.
You do. Yeah. And you have to kind of pull the energy from your boots sometimes. Yeah. And it is good. And what I will say is that awful stuck phase moves. Grief, it doesn't go away, but it does move. Yeah. And there does, you know, at this point in time, I won't say I don't have days where, like, I miss my husband every day. But now when I see a memory or I look back at something, I smile, I don't cry. Or maybe I do cry, but they're not gut-wrenching, lonely tears. They're happy tears of happy memories. Yeah. So I feel that I've kind of grown back into myself, if that makes if that makes sense, you know. And I do definitely feel that, and I feel very strongly, and I think it certainly helped me. I don't believe that love dies. I don't believe, you know, yes, the physical body dies. This is my hippie holistic bit, Lisa, but I don't. I believe we're all energy, and there's good energy and there's difficult energy. But I don't believe that love, I think love is the most powerful energy, and it doesn't die. It just moves to another place. And, you know, my husband loved gardening, and when I'm in the garden, I feel him. I feel that sense of love around me, you know, and I think as well, if you can, nature can be a great way of, this sounds silly, but it literally bringing us back to earth, because no matter how awful you feel and how lonely you feel and how cold you feel in that winter of grief, those daffodils come up every spring. And there's a sense of that continuity of life is, for me, was very important and gave me a lot of hope. Yeah. And can I ask you, the way that people avoid talking about the cause of death when someone dies by suicide, I imagine that to be frustrating for some people. For other people, they probably don't want to talk about it. But for you, did people try to avoid mentioning how he had died? A lot of people asked at the removal and the funeral, you know, was it a heart attack? What, you know, what happened? It was so sudden. And I said straight away, no, he died by suicide. He took his own life. And again, going back to what we were talking about earlier, I accepted it. I never got angry with him, because for some people, they just have reached the end of their road, and he was too gentle. He couldn't do it anymore. And I'll share something again with you, Lisa. And about a week after he passed away, I had the most dreadful nightmare. And I think I've never been so terrified in all my life during this. And it was a dream where I was looking at my husband's body, but it was the most grotesque version of him, almost like these medieval drawings that sometimes you see. And I genuinely felt an energy come through my stomach. I woke up from terrified, and I felt an energy come through my stomach and out the back of the base of my spine. And I was afraid to close my eyes, and I was afraid to open my eyes. But in hindsight, I really genuinely believe it was his way of sharing with me how difficult that dark space was for him.
Okay.
Again, everyone has their own beliefs. That's my belief, because I don't think he was such a gentle person, and I don't think he would really wanted me to know that it was just too hard. And for some people it is too difficult.
And you respected that.
Totally respected it. You know, and I think we have to give the respect to that decision. You know, I mean, he did leave a note, and he did say, "I'm taking this selfish decision." And I don't actually, a lot of people think and say, I've heard it said that suicide is a very selfish way, because you're leaving your loved ones behind, or trying to deal with it. And I'm only talking about my specific experience. But he was selfless, dealing with what he had to deal with his whole life. And he made this decision to set himself free, and I totally respected that. You know.
Okay. Did you find that outside support in terms of therapy, counseling, support groups, any of those kind of things helped you? As a psychotherapist, obviously you would have an experience of going to therapy and all that, but as a human being.
Yes. I mean, I was in therapy. I had a wonderful therapist who really helped me through. Yeah, absolutely. And there's something very, and I'm saying this as a therapist and also as a human being, and you've heard it said as well, Lisa, you know, the power of actually being listened to is huge. Actually talking about how you're feeling, even if you don't know how you're feeling, and you're going all around the place, because your emotions are all over the place.
Even if you're feeling nothing, it's a feeling.
Exactly, it's a feeling. And to have that heard and validated and reflected back is a huge help. Is a huge help. I didn't do any group therapy for bereavement myself, but that can be hugely helpful to have people who have been through a similar experience and being able to share. And I think, you know, perhaps that was a mistake on my part, because just having that connection, if it's in a group therapeutic space, you're able to share, you're meeting other people who have had a similar experience. So that then you feel less isolated. Yeah.
And of course, isolation is a huge part of all grief, but complicated grief in particular, I think there is it's so individual, isn't it? I mean, every type of grief is individual, but I think in particular, people who have been bereaved by suicide, there are no two people who are the same in it.
No.
And I think the general point of talking about it is, for me anyway today, is that I obviously feel devastated that you went through that, but I feel kind of hopeful about how you have come through it this many years later.
Yes.
And I think that the fact that you're a therapist is one point, but I think you don't have to be a therapist to navigate it in a way that is manageable in a very intolerable situation.
Yes. And I what I would say to anybody who's listening is to be mindful of everyone's experience being different. It's not a one size fits all.
Mm. Mm.
And I think I do the Darkness into Light walk every year.
Yeah.
And what I think is lovely about that is there's a collective respect. It's huge. It was the biggest thing for me. There's just, you're walking beside someone. Some people are talking, some people are not talking. Everybody's walk is different.
Mm.
But that collective respect and support for both, for support and love for the person who has gone, but also people who are left behind. It's huge.
Yeah.
And for me, that
you really see each other, don't you, on that?
Yes. And it's something, it doesn't have to be said, it's felt. That's the difference. Felt. You know.
You wrote a beautiful poem about.
I did, Anne. Yes, of course I will.
Share it with us.
Yeah, I did a course in bereavement with the in Athlone with the International Institute of Personal Development in Athlone, and it was an amazing, again, another assistance through my own, you know, and they kind of went different ways of looking at grief. And they asked to write a poem, and so I'll share it with you, Lisa. It's called My Black Coat, and I guess it documents what we've been talking about. So I'll share it with you. Where's my coat of colours gone? Gone to a space with my happiness and my love. I search and search but cannot find any colours in my mind. I'm feeling numb and cold and shocked. In limbo, my emotions locked. And in the corner of the room, a big black coat of doom, doom, doom. It mocks and frightens me, I think, that this black coat, my only link to where I am inside and out. I want to howl, I want to shout, but keep it in, I'm terrified. I feel a part of me has died. A year has passed, I don't know how, in the house alone just now. My heart is aching, I rub my chest to ease this massive pain, I guess. And slowly tears begin to fall. I'm shouting out his name, I call. I reach out for the big black coat and wrap it round me, and I fall into the depths of my despair. I scream and howl, it isn't right, it isn't fair. I wear the black coat all the time, and slowly I accept it's mine. Some days it's heavy, sometimes light, but with this coat I no longer fight. I wear my coat with pride, you see, because it is a part of me. The years roll by and life moves on. Where has my coat of colours gone? I close my eyes and then I see the colours are in memories. My coloured coat was always there. I couldn't see it, was unaware. So I look back and forward to making memories anew for others when my time is done, whatever coat I choose to wear.
It's just beautiful, Leonie.
Thank you. I think for me, it came from my experience, and I think when you're writing from the heart, the words just flowed at the time. They just flowed, and
authentic and
yeah. It means a lot to me because it's my experience. Yeah.
Listen, I can't thank you enough for doing this. It's such a privilege for me and for anybody who's watching this to have an insight into your experience, and for you to share it with us is so generous, and I appreciate it so much.
You're so welcome.
I want to ask you if there's anything you want to say to finish up, and I also want to say that I will put up support numbers and the number for your service as well on the Facebook page, because I think it's a very moving and challenging subject, and I think you've spoken really beautifully. So thank you.
You're so welcome. You're an absolute privilege. And I was so thrilled to be able to take part in this, because I do feel very passionate about suicide, about, you know, talking about it, and also that one size doesn't fit all.
No.
So it's very, if I could, I would just ask anyone to just be there. Don't worry about saying the right thing or the wrong thing. Just leave that space and be there. If all that person who's bereaved wants to do is curl up in a ball and cry and have that witnessed, just be brave enough to be there for them, because that means everything. The isolation from friends who are finding it difficult, and I do understand that people do find it very difficult, but the best support you can be is just to be there.
Absolutely.
And listen. Never ever underestimate the power of listening. It's huge.
Yeah. Listen, thank you.
You're so welcome, Lisa. An absolute pleasure.